All right. So we'll start off with introductions. My name is Sam Gold, and I'm the Executive Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, also known as RiverCOG. And joining me is, I'll let Margot introduce herself.
Margot Burns, I'm the Environmental Planner at RiverCOG.
And why don't we just have everyone take a turn and introduce yourselves. You might need to take a moment to unmute yourself, but just everyone take a turn, and we will, so we know who you are, and everyone knows who you are as well. So.
Everyone, my name is Maria Martinez. Resident of Old Lyme since 2017 and an alternate on the Zoning Commission.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Bernie Gelati, Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission in Lyme.
Ross Burns, Zoning Enforcement Officer for the town of Lyme.
Where are you, Ross? Are you town of Lyme?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So
No.
No.
No, my name is up there.
Okay.
Patrick Crowley, Town of Lyme,
Welcome.
Wetland Commission.
I'm Phyllis Ross, Town of Lyme, P&Z.
Cool. Okay. Christine Darnell, I apologize. This was my husband's computer. So Christine Darnell, I'm wetlands alternate and low-income housing.
Christine, how do you spell your last name?
Darnell.
My name is Candace Fuchs. I'm on the Economic Development Commission for the town of Old Lyme.
Welcome.
I'm Dan Rubino, same commission, Old Lyme also.
Sue Hessel, Conservation Inland Wetlands, Lyme.
Humphrey Tyler. I'm an alternate on planning and zoning in the town of Lyme and a member of the Open Space Commission.
Michael Foliano, I chair the Affordable Housing Committee in Old Lyme.
Mary Jo Nozel, Board of Selectmen, Town of Old Lyme.
I'm Mary Stone. I'm on the
Old Lyme
RiverCOG and also an alternate on P&Z
Hey, Mary.
and Town of Lyme.
Hi, I'm Carol House. I'm on the P&Z and Lyme and also on the Affordable Housing Commission in Lyme.
Steve Mattson, First Selectman of Lyme.
Welcome.
Jack Soger, Town of Lyme, Zoning Board.
I'm Jennifer Thomas, taking the minutes for the town of Lyme.
Great.
Dan Beret, Land Use Coordinator, Town of Old Lyme.
I see Harold has joined us.
Yes. Harold Thompson, Chairman Planning Commission and the Affordable Housing.
Great, welcome. I also see we have Tim Griswold, First Selectman of Old Lyme, joining us. We have someone on the phone, 836-2506. I don't know if you would like to introduce yourself. You're muted at the moment, but. Okay, that's fine. Anyone else who would like to introduce themselves that hasn't so far?
My name is Bob Cope. I'm with the Open Space Commission in the town of Lyme and Recreation Commission in town of Lyme.
Great, welcome.
Hey Sam, it's Dan. The gentleman on the phone is Paul, the chairman of zoning in the town of Old Lyme.
Okay, great. I will rename him Paul. All right. Great. Well, if everyone has introduced themselves, I'll turn it over to Margot and I will get the presentation going. So just 1 second, I'll get that up on the screen. All right, go ahead and take it away, Margot.
Okay, Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you also to the Town of Lyme and Old Lyme Planning and Zoning Commissions for allowing us time to speak with you this evening. My name is Margot Burns, and I'm the Environmental Planner at the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments, or RiverCOG. Joining me in giving this presentation is Sam Gold, our Executive Director. At this time, I'd like to recognize your RPC members, Mary Stone of Lyme and Harold Thompson of Old Lyme. Would either of you like to say anything? All set?
Not at this time. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll just say welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. This is for us to learn about what you see as priorities in all the areas in which planning can help our two towns.
Great, thank you, Mary. And then I'd also like to recognize RPC Chair Frank DeFelice. I don't think he's on this meeting. He might be at the meeting for Chester Deep River in Essex tonight also we're having. So we would like to begin this meeting with a brief presentation followed by an open discussion based on the 5 questions that were circulated prior to the meeting. Everyone but the presenters will be muted for the presentation portion, and we will unmute speakers for the discussion portion. We will go over more procedural matters for the discussion portion when we get there. We expect this presentation to last approximately 1 hour. And with that, let's begin. So why are we here? As a reminder, RiverCOG, the Regional Planning Committee, and our consultant Fitzgerald and Halliday are working on the first regional plan of conservation development for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region. On June 29th and July 7th, we held a region-wide introductory presentation that offered a primer on RiverCOG, the Regional Planning Committee, and the RPOCD. We will begin tonight's presentation with a brief recap of the key takeaways from the introductory presentation, which is also available to view on the project website, rivercogregionalplan.org. We will then spend a few minutes explaining what we mean by the region and why it is that we think regionally. The purpose of this discussion is to focus our perspective. Although we are here to learn about your town's issues and goals, it is important to keep in mind that we are creating a regional plan. So our focus should be on how your town's issues and goals fit into the region as a whole. We will highlight some examples of this by showcasing a few goals from your POCD and comparing them to goals of other towns across the region. Then we will turn the rest of this meeting over to you to discuss your responses to the 5 questions that were circulated before the meeting. At the introductory presentation, we set out to answer a few key questions, which I will briefly recap. Why are we here? As I mentioned at the outset, we are creating the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development. What is RiverCOG? The Regional Planning Organization for the Lower Connecticut River Valley. What is the RPC? The RPC is made up of appointed representatives from each of our 17 municipalities and has been tasked to oversee the creation of the RPOCD. What is the RPOCD? It is a visionary policy document that guides land use patterns in the region over the next 10 years. Also at the introductory presentation, we answered the question of why we think regionally, because thinking as a region can help our municipalities solve common problems and achieve common goals. But what do we mean by region? Specifically, we are talking about the Lower Connecticut River Valley, which is made up of 17 municipalities: Chester, Clinton, Cromwell, Deep River, Durham, East Haddam, East Hampton, Essex, Haddam, Killingworth, Lyme, Middlefield, Middletown, Old Lyme, Old Saybrook, Portland, and Westbrook. Each of these municipalities is unique in character, but their geographic proximity means that certain common conditions will exist among them and that certain issues and goals will necessarily be shared. In addition, many issues and goals will have impacts that cross municipal boundaries. What happens in Lyme could have impacts that reach Old Lyme, and the reverse is true as well. The unique character of each municipality also means that each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Our municipalities are interdependent, relying on each other in areas such as housing, jobs, infrastructure, and critical public services. As part of the RPOCD, we will be examining these common issues and goals, as well as the areas where our towns are interdependent and provide a roadmap for coordination and cooperation. As part of this effort, hearing from you about what matters to your city is critically important. Although this is the first RPOCD for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region, it is important to reiterate that we are not starting from zero. Our analysis of common issues and goals began with a review of the municipal POCDs for all 17 municipalities. After our review, we compared the POCDs and found that they do, in fact, share a great deal in common. Let's look at some of the goals from Lyme's POCD. But first, I'd like to note that these goals were chosen to showcase the breadth of topics covered and were not meant to imply any level of particular importance. So 1, assure access to open space areas consistent with the purpose of the open space plan. Seek linkages with other nearby open space. Where possible, establish and maintain hiking trails. 2, continue town efforts to increase the availability of affordable housing, including rental considerations for less affluent residents. Continue to provide financial and regulatory support for the work of the Affordable Housing Committee. 3, maintain an inventory of historic buildings and historic sites as a reference while reviewing development proposals. To ensure that new development is sensitive to cultural resources, develop an educational program which increases public awareness of historic locations. And 4, review criteria and standards for open space and subdivisions, including minimum acreage and percentage of the subdivision, quality and diversity of land, and access. Now let's turn to Old Lyme's POCD. 1, actively pursue preservation of open space in accordance with an updated open space plan. Seek open space that complements and connects to existing open space areas. Provides for linkage of larger tracts with wildlife corridors, creates green belts in a town-wide trail system. 2, provide official support for ongoing private nonprofit affordable housing efforts by creating a town board to promote affordable housing alternative for various age groups, lifestyles, family sizes, and income levels so that Old Lyme can retain a diverse population. 3, develop additional educational materials to increase awareness of the location and importance of historic sites and buildings, including early industrial and transportation sites and sites related to arts history. And 4, review criteria and standards for open space and subdivisions, including minimum acreage and percentage of the subdivision, quality and diversity of land, and access. When we look across the region at other municipal POCDs, these goals were widely shared. All 17 towns had goals related to establishing or linking open space and greenways. All 17 towns had goals related to diversifying housing stock. 12 towns had goals related to promoting education and sensitive stewardship of cultural and historic resources. And 11 towns had goals related to maximizing open space and subdivisions. Sam?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Now it's time to hear from you. We've reviewed your plans. We've made regional comparisons based on data and our own professional experience, but you live in your town and you have an intimate understanding of how it functions, what it needs, and what makes it special. Before we turn to the 5 questions, we'd like to go over a few procedural matters. We will look at each of the questions in advance. I'm going to go through each of the 5 of them. We'll read them, and then we'll go back to each one individually. We'd like to keep the discussion on each question to about 10 minutes. We may run over on a few questions. We may run under on a few questions. We would like as well to keep comments to about a couple minutes each to allow a good variety of people to speak. And at the end of those 5 questions, if people want to go back and revisit anything and there's time, we're happy to do so. Finally, 10 minutes is not a lot of time for discussion of these questions, and we understand that. If you have any thoughts or comments on any of these questions and you're not able to express them at this meeting, whether it's an issue of time or you just don't feel comfortable, you can always email us your feedback. Our project manager at RiverCOG is Senior Planner Megan Juflis, and her email address is mjouflas@rivercog.org. Or you can reach out to your RPC members, and we've set up actually Gmail accounts for your RPC members, and that would be Lyme or Old Lyme RPC@gmail.com. We will make sure that that information is given to you at the end of the presentation. So when we start off, let's go through the 5 questions. So the first question is, what is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley? Number 2 is, what do you see as your town's role in the region? 3 is, what are the challenges your town is facing, and what would be easier to address working regionally or with neighboring towns? 4 is, what do we do well in our region, and what can we do better in our region? And the 5th question is, how could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town? So I'm going to go back to number 1. What is your vision for the Lower Connecticut River Valley? And I am going to turn off the presentation so we can all see each other, and we can start the conversation. You will find that under the participants button, there's an option for raising your hand. You can click that button, and the little raise your hand icon will come up. But since we're a small group, you can just raise your hand in the camera and we can call on you. So, and also we do have Paul joining us by phone. So Paul, you can just, you're unmuted, so you can just speak up if you want to make a comment. So getting this started.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome, Paul. So to get started, who wants to start this discussion off as to what your vision is of the Lower Connecticut River Valley? If you were traveling somewhere in the world and you wanted to describe this part of the world to someone, what would you want to be able to tell them about this place? Either today or in the future, what's your vision for this place? I may call on someone if no one volunteers.
Humphrey, I bet you could start that one off.
Yeah. So Humphrey Tyler, why don't you start off?
Margot, I'll get even with you at some point for putting me on the spot like that. I'm not sure that this addresses the question of what is my vision, but I think that the one aspect of all these 17 towns that make up our RiverCOG is in fact the Connecticut River. It is the one major landscape or geographic aspect of this region that really defines us all, and it defines our region. And so I think that the question of what will be the river's role in the future of this region is vitally important. And how should we, as the 17 towns, try to conserve and sustain the river so that it can provide a positive role for the quality of life in our region. Specifically, a couple of issues that I see on the horizon that might threaten that are, number one, excessive recreational use of the river. There have been stories in the local media and further up the river about the fact that particularly this summer, there has been an enormous amount of recreational, particularly boating use of the river. In some cases, some of the activities, I understand, have gotten dangerous. So I think that we have to look at that. We have to look at the question of perhaps overuse of the river. A second issue is the question of the ecology and the ecosystems of the river. They're threatened on several fronts, one of which is invasive species, particularly plant species. So I think that our regional plan should try to address those two issues.
Well, thank you very much, Humphrey. And I'm sure you'll get back at Margot sooner or later. Who else wants to talk about their vision for the lower Connecticut River Valley? All right, Jack, you're muted. Let's see if you have to unmute yourself and go ahead. Go ahead, Jack. You have the floor.
What comes down the river?
If you could speak up, Jack. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me now? Or?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So what controls what comes down the river? I mean, it seems like regardless of what we do, you know, starting with the first town, it seems like we should have some objective to try to influence what comes down the river.
Yeah, and that is something that connects us all the way up to Canada when it comes to the Connecticut River. I know that Springfield had a large sewage release of sewage. I think it was maybe last week, and that, you know, unfortunately flows downstream into Connecticut. So yeah, that is something which I think we need to be cognizant of, is that not only does the health of the river rely on all of our 17 towns working together, it's really a multi-state, binational project. And we are lucky that we have been engaged on that level. Margot, her whole career has been involved in looking at the big picture for the river. So I think that's a good point, is that the larger watershed of the Connecticut River affects Lyme and Old Lyme. All right, how about Phyllis and then Tim?
Forgive me if I seem to be going out of the order of the 5 topics, but I see in order to address topic number 1, I really think I want to mention the number 5, which is the Regional Plan of Conservation and Development.
Okay.
What I would like to see, I think, as Humphrey pointed out, the river is a major factor, but I think I am on planning and zoning, and I am working with you today because I must represent the town of Lyme. And I do have to say, when you talk about conservation and development, Lyme is all for conservation. We have been a leader in conservation. Mm-hmm. Development is another story. And the various things, as the woman who formerly held your office once said about Lyme, you can summarize Lyme's idea of development by saying, go away. But anyway, and this is not to put Lyme down. I don't mean to. It's my town. I love it. But we are not looking to do things. I'm not saying we shouldn't be looking, but as speaking for the town and from our own plan of conservation and development, the town has not been looking for affordable housing rentals for low-income people. This is just something that historically, if you look at the plans we've done every decade, Lyme is opposed to rentals and opposed to anything that changes the rural character of Lyme. Now, what I've noticed is that the opposition to these things has gotten a little bit less, but what I would like to know is how can we work together in Lyme? Historical sites, we do have historical sites, but we also have a wonderful group of people that are working to protect the historical sites and also to keep all of the data about these. So what is it that we can do? There's only one new thing that comes to mind that we could share with the region, and that is the bothersome question of short-term rentals. That concern we have in common, but other than that, you tell me what in terms of development that we could do together as a region.
So I'll quickly address that in that even a town like Lyme, which is very much an outlier, when we looked at all the POCDs, you know, Lyme is very strong about conservation and had very little about development. But Lyme is dependent on services in your neighboring towns. You know, the housing market is regional in many ways. The employment market is very much regional. People who provide essential services in the town of Lyme, which even is not that, you know, even the smallest of our towns, they have to live somewhere. So whether it be cooperation on transit and membership in Nine-Town Transit, whether it is other issues regarding the transportation network, the housing market, employment, economic activity, even if it doesn't take place in Lyme, whether you're going to have to go shopping somewhere. The people who live in Lyme are going to have to work somewhere. So there's need for some sort of recognition that no town has a wall around it, and is Lyme the right place for all types of development? No. You know, some types of development require infrastructure like sewer and water, and Lyme may not be the right place for that. But that doesn't mean that you may not need that development somewhere nearby, whether it be a hospital or a community college or a university. So I think Tim was next, and then we have Sue, and then Carol. So go ahead, Tim. Oh, Tim, you're muted. We can't hear you. I don't know if you have your microphone. Oh, no. See, huh? I don't think anyone. Yeah, I don't know if there's a microphone on your desktop that's not plugged in or turned on correctly. What I'm going to do, Tim, is I'm going to send you a phone number, and you can try calling on the phone and join that way. And while you're doing that, let's have Sue go ahead, and then Sue, you need to unmute, and then we'll have Carol. So I'm gonna send you a number, Tim, and that will be the number to log in. So just wait 1 second.
Hi, I'm sorry that I have extraneous noise here, but the one thing that strikes me is that the river seems to separate us. The eastern part of the fourth town seems to be forgotten very much by the western part of this, 13 towns. And that's one thing that I think we need to do to bring us all together to do planning.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Margot, if you could help facilitate while I am sending Tim the right numbers.
Okay. Sue, I think that's actually a good good thought. A lot of people on the other side in Lyme, Old Lyme, work in the New London area, and sometimes we know that it's tough to get from one side of the river to the other, especially in the summertime. So I think that is, you know, is a valuable thing to say.
We're also in 2 different counties.
Yes, and
London and Middlesex.
Yeah, that doesn't help. I know, you know, different newspapers sometimes and things. So that is, I think that's something that we don't hear a lot, but I think it's true in a lot of areas. Let's see, who was next on the okay, Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with some of the things that Phyllis was talking about, and in particular, affordable housing. And I agree with all of what she said about the history of Lyme, but we're starting to make some progress in terms of talking with, I'm on the Affordable Housing Committee in Lyme, and we're starting to make some progress by talking to some of the other towns in our region about what they have done for affordable housing and whether it matches what we can do. But one of the things that we came up with in the latest talks was that the state regulations keep us divided in terms of affordable housing, because they're guidelines for affordable housing, but they're town by town. And we're trying to meet, all of us are individually trying to meet those goals and standards, and they're very, very difficult. They're way out of our reach at this point. But we share the needs. We need young places for young people, young families. I know in Lyme we have a volunteer fire department, and we need places for those young men and women who are just getting started to live close to where they volunteer. We also have a lot of older folks like myself and some of us on this meeting that maybe at some point want to get out of the bigger family home that we have and move into something that's one level or smaller or whatever. And in Lyme, and we don't have that facility. So instead of trying to have Lyme and Old Lyme and Essex and Old Saybrook and all those each try to meet these goals, if we could look regionally at what it is that might be needed in all of those areas, and then find out where land is and where funding is, and join together to build some of this affordable housing or make it available through rentals is another thing. But I think and this is, goes down to your item number 3 about what can we really do more effectively in a regional basis. And I think making housing affordable in sufficient quantities to fill these kinds of needs needs to be done regionally and not town by town. And to get to that, we also are going to have legislation changes. And I think that's important. Thank you.
Very good comment.
So Tim just joined us by phone. So Tim, and then I think, actually, did Sue get to speak yet?
No.
Okay, so it will be Tim and then Sue. So go ahead, Tim.
Oh, yes, she did. Actually, she did.
Okay.
She did. Yes.
All right. So Tim, can you hear us? All right. Why can't I hear him? This is very, very odd. All right, so Tim, what you'll see is there is a microphone icon on the lower left, and there's a little arrow with options, this is very odd that we can't hear you. I think. You may have to switch to phone audio potentially. I don't know, Dan, if you could try working with Tim on getting him set up while, we'll get back to Tim when we can. Yeah, I don't understand. I'm so sorry, Tim. I don't know why we can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do, but I'm at home right now, but let me see what I can do.
Yeah, okay. All right.
He's not muted like Paul was muted on his phone,
no,
right?
He's not muted either
Okay.
through Zoom or through his phone. He's joining by phone as well, and for some reason, when he speaks, we can't hear him. So,
okay.
So try to work with him, see if you can find a way. Actually, if you're on your iPhone, Dan,
yep.
Why don't you initiate a 3-way phone call with Tim, and then when he joins in with your 3-way phone call, he'll have audio through your phone.
All right. I don't have his cell phone number, but I'll see if I can call the town hall.
Okay, I will text you his number right now.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Everyone, I think we got through everyone except Tim. Would you like to move on to the next question?
Yeah, let's move on to the next question while we're getting Tim set up, and then we'll go back to Tim Griswold to speak. So the next question is, I think Maria wants to speak. So Maria, you go ahead, and then we'll move on. So unmute yourself, and then.
Hi, just a comment in terms of some of the things that I've been hearing so far, and also been thinking about around the collaboration and coordination within the region and each one of the towns. And I struggle with, let's say Lyme, for example. It's a small town, And when I look at some of the other towns, you know, much larger than our town, and I wonder about parity of services within the region. And not that, you know, every town needs the same level or the same support, but in my opinion, I would think that there should be some core basic level of services that crosses all the town, that hits all of the towns, so that there's a baseline of a regional service structure. And, you know, that would be the transportation, the healthcare, you know, the housing, you know, just all of those, you know, critical services. You know, I think that one of the things that we might want to consider is how do you establish some level of parity across the region, you know, and establish almost an essential or core level of service. So that's my comment.
Right. Yeah. I'll just very quickly address that. Is that the state in recent years, and probably last decade, has been very interested in the idea of regional services and finding ways for towns to cooperate, and if not to save money through cooperation together, at least provide a higher level of service for the same money. And that is something which the chief elected officials, David Mattson and Tim Griswold, both sit on our board of directors. Those are things that we're looking at, trying to find ways for towns to share and work together. Not in a top-down way where the state's saying that you have to do this, but doing it in a cooperative way between towns. So, and that is something that we're very aware of and trying to figure out how to do.
Great, thank you.
So, thank you, Maria. So let's move on to the next question, which is, what do you see as your town's role in the region? So we know that Lyme and Old Lyme, even though they're right next to each other, they're very unique. And every one of the 17 towns is unique, but has different roles in what it provides either in services, in what it offers in recreation and conservation and natural resources. And we would like to hear from you as to what you see your town's role as. I think because you know, Lyme and Old Lyme are very different, I think it'd be good to hear from, you know, I want to hear from representatives of both towns as to what you think your town's role is. And go ahead, Mary, if I'll put you on the spot.
Okay, well, I've lived 27 years in Old Lyme and 3 years in Lyme, so I and currently own houses in both towns, so I'll speak from knowledge of both towns. Obviously, Old Lyme and Old Saybrook and East Lyme are where Lyme goes shopping, and where we see our doctors and our dentists and get our cars fixed. So they're very important for us, but we also feel in Lyme that we're very important for the region, primarily for things that Humphrey has mentioned, like recreation, land conservation, real protection of the environment, as well as places to go walking and hiking, and places to get away, like Rogers Lake. So while we never want to have the type of development that's been discussed in Old Lyme, up in Lyme, we do feel it's regionally important, and this has been alluded to by several people. One thing that I really liked about Old Lyme when we moved here 30 years ago was the economic diversity. Granted, there really wasn't any racial diversity, but there was economic diversity. There were people at all income levels, and they were pretty well dispersed throughout town. And I'd like to see that continue. I don't want to see in Old Lyme or Lyme become like East Lyme, where there are entire large enclaves of subdivisions of very similar houses and very similar income levels. That leads, I think, to a certain ostracism from the community that you have to willfully break through, and not all people make the effort. So I would like to see that economic diversity continue, and I think that will help address some of the concerns of making housing available for many income levels, which we also need to preserve.
Great. Thank you, Mary. So other people for their opinions of what their town's role is in the region. Sue, would you go ahead, Sue?
Yeah. The other thing that Lyme has is farming, and I'd love to see more farming, and that would also bring in the housing so that there are places for the workers to be able to live. But I think it's exciting that we have some good farms.
So supporting agriculture, great. Other comments of your town's role in the region, and what services you provide, what do you bring to the larger area? Obviously one is, go ahead, Mary Jo.
Thank you. It's interesting. I was kind of picking up on Mary's points. I think Lyme and Old Lyme are twins in many respects, a twin city, so to speak. And it's interesting. I think part of the communication piece we need to focus on amongst member towns really needs to be brought to bear between Lyme and Old Lyme for the things that we're mutually dependent on. As Mary said, perhaps they're not interested in having a large affordable housing complex. But what is it that Old Lyme can provide for these firemen, for policemen, for teachers who work in both Lyme and Old Lyme, and what can Lyme provide us if we are the town that's going to do that? The transportation needs, the jobs. So I think there's a communication gap perhaps between our 17 towns. And I think this regional development is going to be key to that, seeing not only what we have in common, but how do we make those commonalities well known and happen. We have so much in common regarding conservation and the river and the trails and the concern for the environment. But the things that separate us, but that we all want, I think is a real need for communication to make sure, again, as Maria said, that parity happens. But until we communicate that and maybe have a working group to address those priorities, it's going to be hard. It's going to keep the boundaries between our towns as opposed to opening up in a regional fashion.
Okay, thank you very, very much. I see Harold raise his hand. Go ahead.
Yes. Yes, thank you.
Yep.
I think the parity is a very significant thing. We were brought into Ledge Light a couple of years ago, and we're in with a number of other towns, and we have one vote. Mm-hmm. One vote. And so in terms of what is going on developed in any kind of development, we have very little say. And so that's a little bit frustrating. The other thing about, affordable housing is I think we need to look at, in the town of Old Lyme, we need to take a look at our zoning regulations. Because when we look at accessory apartments or anything like that, first of all, you can't add an accessory apartment to any house that was built after 1995. That's incredible. Why not? And I think all our zoning regulations need to be looked at also in terms of, the shoreline. We have the most restrictive height restrictions of any town, any shoreline town in the state of Connecticut. Not that it affects the whole town itself. I applaud Lyme for their open space. It's probably not known to many, but they've got more than 12,000 acres of open space area up in Lyme. It's incredible. We've tried to do a lot in Old Lyme itself. We have not been able to. I think we got a late start for whatever reason, and I think it's it's been a progressive thing, but we've got a lot of trails and we've got a lot of things that have been developed. And I think one of our biggest issues that we're looking at is identifying all that availability and getting it out on the street, letting people know what we have and where it's at and how to access it. So I think that's all I have to say for right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harold. I think we should move on to the next question, which I think we're sort of gotten into already, which is, what are the challenges your town is facing that would be easier to address working regionally or with neighboring towns? So we've discussed the issues of the river, the health of the river, affordable housing, transportation. What other challenges are we facing in Lyme and Old Lyme that would be better or more appropriately addressed on a regional level with neighboring towns? And it could be neighbors that are not in RiverCOG, whether it be Salem or East Lyme. But what are those issues? What do you see? Harold just mentioned Ledulite. Of course, public health is an area where we have a number of regional public health departments. So that's an area that many towns have felt is a way of providing that service. Are there other areas where you see that working together would be more beneficial? Humphrey and then Maria.
Okay, am I live?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. I with regard to challenges and challenges that a challenge that I think that we're all facing, I would like to echo what Phyllis said earlier about the challenge of short-term rentals. Short-term rentals could greatly change the nature of our communities if they are not properly managed and regulated. Old Lyme has a lot of short-term rentals. As a matter of fact, there's a long history of short-term rentals, particularly along the shore. That's not the case in Lyme, and we're starting to face some issues in Lyme. But I think that also short-term rentals can have an impact on affordable housing, because short-term rentals can gobble up what rental housing there is out there. And also the fact that a lot of the short-term rentals are owned by investors. The investors may be local, they may not be local. But the fact that they are buying these properties not as residential properties, but as income-producing properties, completely changes the economics of their purchase decision and the price. And a couple of the short-term rentals that we have seen sold here in Lyme have been at very high square footage prices. So the growth of the short-term rental market, at least in Lyme, but I would also think in Old Lyme, could drive up real estate prices and basically drive out affordable housing, what affordable housing we have.
Yeah, so that's a really good topic, and it's something that we've discussed at the Regional Planning Committee, specifically because this is coming up in towns across the region. Chester has dealt with this issue, and we would like to be a conduit for getting the different planning commissions together, planning and zoning commissions together, on how you address these issues, because there's been issues of people renting large houses and using them as venues for weddings. So you have short-term rentals turning into social halls. We've heard anecdotal stories of people renting short-term rentals during the COVID pandemic, and then using it for social gatherings. And then there's well-documented research into the impacts that short-term rentals have on affordability, but also just neighborhood impacts. So that's something which I think is a good challenge, which is relatively new, that we need to be working together on a regional level with. So, all right, I think Maria had your hand up, right?
And I think some of what I may say may dovetail on this this seasonal rental piece, because you'd mentioned examples of the seasonal rentals being used for other things like weddings and other venues, and I guess that begs the question to me is what opportunities do we have from an economic development standpoint? We have beautiful coastal areas. We have many people, utilizing the river, but are we really taking full advantage of our coastal areas, and how, if we really identify some of the deficiencies or the things that people are wanting and doing and needing, is there something that we could develop that would, create jobs, increase tourism? It would have to be upscale and managed well, but there's something there that I think is missing that is worth looking into from an economic development standpoint. The other comment, because COVID was brought up, and that seems to raise a whole host of other questions, from an overall regional standpoint, that ties to, again, parity of medical services. Old Lyme, we don't have any COVID testing, in our area. I don't think Old Saybrook does. I'm not sure what Clinton or Westbrook has. Essex doesn't have. I mean, we're looking at, walking into a school year, where testing for teachers, and staff is just not readily available. It's certainly not in Old Lyme. So I think about, what does this mean for us in terms of parity of medical services across the region? There are certain hotspots that are getting a ton of testing. CVS is in the western part for the most part, but Southeast is kind of, Greenfield area. So, I mean, I wonder about our medical support during this pandemic. I also worry about open retail space, that is happening because folks are shutting down businesses. What are we going to do with that space? How do we address that? Do we use it for educational purposes? Do we use it for something else? Again, I think there's a ton of things under COVID that we might want to, kind of set aside and consider, because that will be with us for a bit.
Thank you very much, Maria. And yeah, health is a big regional challenge that needs to be done in a multi-town way. So I think I have Dan Beret and then Phyllis. So go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so I'm kind of relaying some information from Tim here. We're kind of texting some stuff. So Tim wanted me to just chime in about the challenges of I-95 and the railroad. I think he's referring to some of the beach traffic and some of the development with the railroad, as well as he wanted me to mention, the town of Lyme, and I don't believe Lyme either has, an Essex Meadow type retirement facility. So when people are aging out, and I think this was brought up before by a resident of one of the Lyme participants, that people don't have a place to stay in town if they age out of their homes. They're having to move out of the area or to a different municipality, and I think it's obviously not a good thing to lose people who want to stay in town.
Great, thank you, Dan. And Phyllis, go ahead.
We've spoken, a number of us have mentioned affordable housing as important, and I just want to underscore something. It certainly is, and as Carol mentioned, that our Affordable Housing Commission is taking a somewhat different and somewhat more progressive look at creating housing. But I want to point out that one of the strongest points about Lyme has been the strength of our volunteers and the volunteer services. And as we are aging in Lyme, as is Connecticut as a whole and many of the other communities, unless we have these types of housing for seniors, and especially affordable housing for younger people, the vitality that these communities have is going to be lost. And maybe that's something, I think it's correct that you can live in one town and as most people do, work elsewhere and shop elsewhere. But I think in order to keep both the beauty of the towns and the vitality, we really have to maybe look more closely at affordable housing and come up with new ideas of the kind of housing we should have and how to accomplish it.
Great. Thank you very much, Phyllis. So other ideas of challenges that would be better addressed in a multi-town approach. And I think Carol, go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, this is looking into the future. And COVID has given us a lot of things to worry about. But it also has perhaps for our towns is providing some opportunities. One of the things that's happened during all of this pandemic is that people are working from home, and people are working and not having to go into the office for a month at a time, and sometimes 2 months at a time. And I think the new normal as we get back is not going to have everybody working in working in an office every day and commuting in every day. And so I think it's very possible that the towns in our area are going to be chosen places to live for people who work in one of the cities. And that might be New Haven, it could be Hartford, it could be New York City. If they don't have to commute every day, but maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, it's a very, very commutable time. So if we see this as a potential, it can bring an enormous, and I don't want to use enormous, we don't like that in Lyme, bringing in enormous quantities of people, but I'm saying it can bring in an energy, as Phyllis was saying, into all of our towns by having younger working people and young people, young families, mid-career families, a whole variety of diversity. And so I think we need to think about what would draw them more, or what do they need, or how should we plan with this new normal in mind, because I think that's very likely to happen.
So I'll just chime in before we move on that one item that's been brought up in other meetings is high-speed internet and communication networks.
Absolutely.
And how important that's proven to be during COVID. First, to be able to educate kids at home, but secondarily for parents to be able and people to be able to work from home. And that is something that our region does not have great access to. We don't have competition for high-speed internet. The cell service in a lot of the area is not very good. And so there's been a lot of discussion about the new 5th generation mobile internet network coming out. How do we make sure we don't get left behind and we get that service here so people can conduct their business and their work from this place. So that
I agree, Sam, and I would say also high priority should be keeping the electricity going.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of very angry first selectmen after which was a relatively minor storm. Yes.
Any chance we can bury the wires?
Well, we're going to be we're going to be calling a special COG meeting. Norm Needleman, the first selectman of Essex and senator, he called a press conference last week calling for the CEO of Eversource to step down. So this is an issue throughout Connecticut and in our region. It just the reliability of our grid is just not there. So yeah, that's another good point. You're right. Internet doesn't matter if you don't have power. So
this is Candace Fuchs, and I have a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
To tail on to Maria's concept of resources, the town of Old Lyme has a magnificent school, or Regional School District 18, but we face a challenge in reputedly declining school population. So far, my image is that we're kind of holding on by our fingernails, and we're managing to keep the population where it is. We don't know what's going to happen going forward, but we definitely cooperation for some. We offer so many different programs in our school, and some of them have already begun to regionalize to some extent. For instance, our robotics program now works with East Lyme, and looking into the future, some people who are involved with those programs feel that we may have to regionalize in other ways too, and I'll let you answer my question.
Yeah, no, the demographics of our region in Connecticut are a serious issue, and that's something which we're going to be discussing in our regional plan, because you're not the only town with declining school enrollment, and the threat that poses to your school, whether we have a number of towns across the region that have had to close schools in recent years. There may be greater calls in the future if this continues for greater regionalization potentially, but that comes at a cost. When a town loses its schools, it loses a lot of its identity. So I don't have all the answers here, but I think one of the answers is obviously attracting more young families with school-age kids to be able to fill those seats. So the other option is, if we continue along that trend, is going to be probably school closures and more regionalization. That is something which is a demographic time bomb that we're dealing with here in Connecticut as our population ages, and we haven't been replacing the population with growth in young families. And I think part of that is affordable housing, and part of that is jobs. So I see Bob. I see Bob has his hand up, and then Harold.
Thank you. I have notes from the last two questions of everything that everybody said, which is it all comes together in this. So as a younger family living in Lyme who has small kids entering the school system, and also being involved in volunteering not only with the town commission, the open space and recreation, but my wife is the environmental director for the Lyme Land Conservation Trust. So we are very deeply rooted already in our last few years of just buying a home here and living in town. And one thing Harold said about the town is, the open space in Lyme is wonderful, and we have a lot of it. So a lot of people can come and enjoy it. And same with the partnership with the land trust and the town is a huge one. And one thing he mentioned is so encouraging that communication and that partnership between like the Old Lyme Land Trust and the Lyme Land Trust, the Old Lyme Open Space Commission, the Lyme Open Space Commission, like opening any sort of communication between the two to help encourage that, because we all go to Old Lyme for a lot of things. People from Old Lyme may or may not come to Lyme for things, but encouraging outdoor activity, encouraging education events that are held outdoor for kids or for families, and taking advantage of all of our free public open space, public and private open space that we have that can be used is a huge thing. So it's, we're talking about the river. We all live on the river, our towns do. So, part of, what my wife and I try to do, I volunteer for the town, but I'm the volunteer of the year for the land trust in Lyme, because I spend my free time helping out and doing things for the public. And there's very few people that do that, and I understand that. So we're rare in that sense, but trying to encourage more people to know that they can do that too. So, and it might not just be me hiking with a chainsaw cutting trees down after a storm, but there could be 12 of me out there. We just don't know that. So trying to find those people, encourage them to not go to Old Saybrook for something, not go to wherever for something, anywhere, but find a way to recreate and take advantage of what we have here. And another thing, like Sue mentioned, the farming that we have in town, not only do we have a wonderful farmers market now at Tiffany's Farm with everybody can come to on Saturdays, of course. We have farm CSAs people can contribute to and actually encourage local farmers, which are also utilizing property that's owned by the town or owned by the land trust, and trying to group all of that together so that we can, you know, keep our agricultural, you know, history, but also use it for new families to be able to have something to do. So it's kind of it's an all encompassing, all of it working together, I feel like is a huge thing. And there's only so many people that are gonna want to go for a hike. Some people don't want to do that. Some people want to go kayaking, and we need to have public launches or places for people to go out on the river and go paddleboarding and go kayaking and do that. Some people don't want to go out on the river because I grew up on a river in Illinois and we used to call them big, fat, loud, stupid boats. There are those up and down the river, and that's Humphrey's concern. Dangerous activity, you know, dangerous activity, overcrowded river. We're at the mouth where people are going to come from all over to get out on the sound, and we have to deal with that no matter what. So, but utilizing our coves, utilizing all of our smaller areas and encouraging people to stay local is a huge thing. So I feel like more education and outdoor events, increasing social media things, which is again going to encourage any kind of younger family that, you know, to actually get involved or to know about things is huge. And, you know, so it's kind of all of the above, you know, and that is something where we can work together as a town, where we can start increasing our communication to piggyback off each other.
Thank you very much, Bob. So I have Ann Hutchinson. You want to unmute yourself and go ahead and speak.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to, I'm not an expert on this at all. I just wanted to raise a question. Maybe some of the experts can think about it. Is we talk about trying to have more affordable housing. We talked about trying to keep our student population enough to support the programs we have. And one thing I was thinking is we have a lot of seasonal houses that were built decades and decades ago that are, you know, hard to upgrade because of some of the restrictions that we have. And I was wondering maybe we could think about if we had a plan to take some of those seasonal houses that are small and maybe affordable to a family and make them more year-round. And you'd have more year-round people living here, more year-round businesses. And right now it's very challenging to do that with some of the current restrictions we have. So maybe we could think about a way is maybe if we convert some of those seasonal houses, on some of them are small lots and we're getting sewers and water put in, maybe that would be, if we think about it in a holistic way, how that might fit into the affordable housing, a place for people to stay after they retire, keeping our student populations higher so that we can keep our excellent schools. It's just something to think about as we go forward. Just wanted to base that as a question or a thought.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Carol, and then we should move on to the next question. We're running a little bit over, so go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I just wanted to say trash and recycling.
Yeah, that's a big issue. And we're with Mira's waste energy plant in Hartford shutting down. That's going to be an issue for every town as to how we deal with our municipal solid waste. So that's something that the COG is going to be working with DEEP on different approaches. So yeah, that is something which is a challenge for all of our towns, and it needs cooperation. So I'm going to move on to the next question is, what do we do well in our region and what can we do better in our region? So we've heard a lot about our open space, particularly in Lyme, but we also have a lot of open space elsewhere in the River Valley. But what other areas do you think we excel in, that we do a good job in? And what areas do you think we need to do better on? Obviously, affordable housing is one of them. What other areas do you think we should give ourselves credit for, and which areas do we need to focus more on? Go ahead, Humphrey.
I think that one of the areas that we do very well on, and that's been mentioned, is our K through 12 educational system. It really is, particularly the District 18, the Lyme, Old Lyme schools, are as good as any private schools in New England. And so I think that we need to bear that in mind as we go forward, that we need to keep our educational system strong for two reasons. Number one, for the future people who are going to be working here and making their livings in Lyme and Old Lyme and the Lower Connecticut River Valley, but also it's important in terms of attracting families, particularly young families, to our area. I know of a couple of young families that have moved into Lyme because of the Lyme school system, because it is so good. So I think that we need to do that. The other thing that I would like to bring up is in terms of what we do well or what we could do better, is the issue of economic development. And I would like this plan to, if we can, look at how our area can position itself for the 21st century economy. And certainly communication infrastructure is a big part of that, but there may be other areas, other aspects of the changes in the economy that are going to be taking place in the next 20, 30, 40 years that we can take advantage of and position this region as having an opportunity to play a big role in that.
Great, thank you, Humphrey. Who's next for what do we do well and what could we do better? Go ahead, Mary.
So one thing that both towns do well and that I've been involved in is the preservation and education of local history. And this speaks to our cultural strength, our strength as a cultural center. We have museums and galleries, and we also emphasize local history in a number of different ways. And that's a strong point. It gives us all a sense of cohesion. When we talk about our historic districts and preservation of unique architectural elements that, you know, make our towns, give our towns their charm and picturesqueness, but also their identity and help us maintain a sense of scale. Someone was talking about our restrictive zoning heights. That really comes from our history. So what could we do better? Well, there's been a lot of talk, necessary talk about you know, how we can welcome other races and make sure they feel welcome if they want to move to our communities. And so going forward, I would say that the history of our two towns, which has been mostly the history of white people, we do have to make sure that we present that in a way that makes people of other ethnicities feel like they could be welcome here and they could build a life here. So it's something we've done well in the past, and we have to sort of orient it towards the future now, I feel.
Right. Thank you, Mary. Oh, yeah. Ann Hutchinson, I don't know your first name. Go ahead, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Okay. One other thing, I think it ties a little bit into what Mary was saying, is art. We are, Lyme is a huge center of Impressionist art, all different types of art, the Lyme Academy of Fine Arts, the Lyme Art Association, the Florence Griswold Museum. It's a huge, huge strength. And I think anything we can do to help support the Academy of Fine Arts and the art resources that we have is something that we should focus on.
Great. So that is something that we both do well and that we could do better at. So that's great. All right. Anyone else want to address the questions of what we do well in our region and what can we do better? All right. I'm going to move, if not seeing anything, we'll move to the last question, which is, how could a regional plan of conservation and development support your town? And this question was considered more of like a planner wonky sort of question, because for the members of the of planning commissions, your job is to write a POCD. And for the job of the zoning commissioners, your job is to write zoning regulations and regulate. We want this regional plan to be relevant. We want this regional plan to be useful to each one of the land use commissioners in our region. So how could this document back you up in your work? And as land use commissioners, as inland wetlands, as conservation commissioners, economic development commissioners, what kind of recommendations would you like to see in this document? And we're going to have a discussion right now, but that's something that you can reach out to Mary, or you can reach out to Humphrey, or to me or Margot. That's really the gist of this question. So how could the regional plan support your town? All right, go ahead, Mary Jo. Unmute.
Thank you. One of the things that I would find personally helpful is if we could see best practices shared across the 17 towns. Because sometimes I think we got it, again, we get back to our boundary situation where we have the same plan every 10 years. But I think if we could see the best practices and what's worked amongst other towns, that might make some of these connections we're talking about seem more viable.
Great, that's excellent. Other comments on how you would like, this regional plan to be useful for you? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
This is Paul Orzel.
Paul and then Bob. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Okay. So everything that I've heard this evening, everyone mentioned, I mean, is absolutely spot on. As there things from basic things that we really would need to look at, starting off with infrastructure, moving on to affordable housing, which there's a huge misconception on affordable housing. Maybe the moving into the elderly folks, and maybe there's more of a central type, I don't want to use the word village, but a central type supporting type organization where they would have all of their needs in one particular spot. There's changing needs that we also have to look at, the young people, what their requirements are. The working from home is huge. The way retail is changing. I mean, all of these are excellent ideas, but let's look at them from a standpoint as a region. Town by town, we really shouldn't be trying to outdo or outsmart one another. But the biggest thing that I really haven't heard that has to be incorporated into this master plan, if you will, or whatever, which is going to be dynamic. It's not something that we just put together and say, okay, we're done and now let's march forward. This is a dynamic plan, but we have to understand our geographic location, our susceptibility to storms, which probably will be increasing in intensity, and the flooding and the sea level rise. We have to keep that in the forefront and address that, I believe, in anything that we do. These are important factors because it can very quickly take down an infrastructure. So we have to be resilient to that as much as we can. But I just want to say that everything I've heard tonight is absolutely spot on. Thank you.
And thank you. Those are great comments. So I got Bob and then Mary.
Yeah, I agree that, yeah, we've had some great conversations, but how can we regionalize? We talked about Lyme has, again, not the best cell service, and high-speed internet is a problem, especially now people of all ages are communicating this way, through Zoom, through phone calls, through conference calls, through whatever. So it's growing and growing and growing. So we need to cater, the town for that. Essex has a great downtown, Chester has a great downtown, but that doesn't mean we need to live there. We can live in Lyme and have the woods and the privacy and the space and all of that and enjoy all the other areas as long as we can work and communicate the way we need to. I worked in New London for 10 years and my wife was a nurse in Hartford. Well, now we both work from home and we work out of our home here in Lyme, but we had to pay for Comcast to trench a line to our house. We have to have a home, a landline that we use because we can't take cell calls at our house. So it's not easy to live here, but we've forced everything to make it work. So we need to make it easier for people to want to live here. Otherwise, they just won't. And then there will be less kids in school, and there will be less people volunteering to help out, and there will be less people getting involved. So figuring out a way to take Steve and Tim's job and figure out the big picture, how can we make it work, but how can we make it work for the small families and the young families that want to be here, but it's difficult. Not everybody's going to, you know, really trench through it, you know, like some people do.
Right. Thank you, Bob. All right, go ahead, Mary.
I just want to tag on to something that was said by Paul Orzal. He brings up a critically important point, and it's something that I've done some work on in the past. That idea of storm preparedness and hazard mitigation through our planning and zoning regs, so that we protect our shoreline, make it more resilient, and able to weather storms better and protect people slightly inland from it better. And so that people who do live on the shore itself can weather storms better. And when there is a major event, how do we respond to it? How do we take care of people? For example, the recent power outage, you know, I was going to the senior center to recharge my phone and get water to drink. How do we, but those activities were all taking place outside. The center itself was closed because of the epidemic. So how do we take care of people's basic needs during emergencies? And I feel that that is something that can definitely be regionalized and helped along by regional planning.
Great. Thank you, Mary. We're getting close to 8:30, so we've gone a little bit over. So I don't know if there's any other comments on how could a regional plan support your town. If not, we can.
So Mary, I just wanted to
add
to Mary's comment about regional support during whatever you want to call it, disasters or storms or whatever we seem to have every year. I'm on the board at the Valley Shore YMCA in Westbrook, and under normal circumstances, you know, excusing COVID, they would be one of those regional type facilities that would provide, I mean, that's our go-to place for showers in hurricanes. And they also have, you know, internet and places to work. And so I'm on the board, so call me biased, but I think it's a great organization. It certainly needs a regional boost. And if that could be part of the plan to support regional organizations like that, I think it would be really valuable.
Thank you, Candace. That's a good point that we haven't made. And it could be made for a number of our nonprofit organizations that support our region. But the YMCA is great. All right, Bernie, and then Bob, and then I'd like to wrap it up. Go ahead, Bernie.
Yeah, I've listened to all the comments tonight, and all of the topics that have come up certainly are worth discussing, and they're all worthy of close consideration. The one thing I find missing in this whole thing is the Gateway Commission and the protection that they provide for the lower Connecticut River Valley. Some of the things I've heard tonight seem to me to fly in the face of what the Gateway Commission is trying to accomplish and has accomplished since the 70s. I mean, this is the commission and the adoption of their standards for the signatory towns has served us pretty well. And that's the main reason we as a lower region look the way we do. And you know, I don't see them represented on this panel, and it's troublesome to me. I hope that they're not being excluded from this whole thing.
So I'll first of all address that. So as you know, Bernie, our Deputy Director, Torrance Downs, is a staff to the Gateway Commission, and RiverCOG and its predecessor, the Connecticut River Estuary RPA, has hosted the Gateway Commission since its inception. So we're not, we are very familiar, and we know exactly the great work that the Gateway Commission has done, and those that group's input will be solicited, and I'm sure we will hear from the members of Gateway as we move on in this process. But just because we're hearing input from someone, let's say someone attends one of these meetings and says we need to build skyscrapers along the river, that doesn't mean that the regional plan will have that in there. I think the value of our viewshed protections along the river, which is something that's unique in Connecticut, is one of our great strengths. And it goes hand in hand with a lot of what we've discussed, but maybe not every idea is going to be compatible, but economic development and tourism is made possible by the protections of the Gateway Commission. Would all types of development be compatible with Gateway? No, but planning is about conflicts and finding a way forward, balancing all the different competing interests. So, but I think that's a very good comment about the value of the Gateway Commission, those Gateway standards, and making sure that that is strongly referenced in our regional plan. I think that's a great comment. So thank you. All right, and Bob, and then we'll wrap it up.
One thing I wanted to speak kind of to what Candace said as well. So I'm a board member of Lyme Youth Services Bureau in Old Lyme. And again, it's for Lymes. It's Lyme and Old Lyme as well. But that was another place where there's a lot of services provided for people. It's not just youth, it's for families and it's for everybody. So encouraging all of the, whether it's the Y, which is a great place, especially in a storm. On Thursday, there was an email sent out that they have power at LYSB and you can come and charge your phone, or you can come to, you can use the services, you can come, do whatever you need. And they provide food and water, and there's a lot of things. So just, I guess, encouraging more of the take advantage of what we do have, because you don't have to be stranded in your home if you have no power. There are ways to do it. Now, granted, we might have to cut the trees to get through the roads, but everybody in town kind of drives around with a chainsaw, and we take care of that pretty quickly. So that part is handled, but encouraging that, maybe people do need a ride and go to the Y or go to some place that can provide those things, or the senior center or anything. And just making sure people are aware of that. So increasing the communication through the town down to the public.
Well, thank you, Bob. And hopefully, if there's power lines involved, no one is going near those.
They were all dead for like 3 days. We were cutting trees before the power came back on. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. So we have a few slides for our wrap up. Margot, I can do them, and I can just plow through them if you don't mind. Get that back up on the screen. Okay. So, as part of our wrap up, we want you to continue your involvement in this process. We're very thankful for the time that you shared with us this evening, and we hope that you will stay involved. Our project website is RiverCOG.regionalplan.org. We will be posting the recording of this discussion to that website. You also find information about the regional plan. Eventually, the draft documents will be posted there. You also can sign up for email notifications, although we will continue sending notifications through the town, through the commissions, through the chairs and the first selectman. I also want to recommend that you use your regional planning committee member. They are your voice on the regional planning committee, who is the steering committee for the regional plan. So please, if you have ideas or concerns or issues, feel free to talk to them, because they're in your community. And when those draft documents come out, please be involved. This is a public document, and everyone's comments and ideas are welcome. So This is the timeline for the project. We started this in winter 2019. We're currently in phase 2, which is the municipal meetings, where we're meeting with all the planning commissions up and down the river. We are also, our first big deliverable is going to be a existing conditions report, which is going to go to the regional planning committee for their review. And once that draft is gone through and finalized, will be posted online. So that will be something which you'll all be able to see and hopefully use as a resource in your towns. Let's see. And so this is if you have any further questions, we can answer them if you'd like. And then this is the contact info for your RPC members. We've set up email addresses that go to RiverCOG and will also go to your RPC members. So that's lymerpc@gmail.com or oldlymerpc@gmail.com. You can also reach out to our staff project manager, who's Megan Juflis, and her email address is mjuflis@rivercog.org. You can also reach out to me or Margot. My email address is S as in Sam, Gold, G-O-L-D, @rivercog.org. And Margot is M Burns, B-U-R-N-S, @rivercog.org. You can also reach out to Dan Beret in Old Lyme, who until very recently had an office at RiverCOG, so he knows us well. And you also can reach out to Bernie as well. He knows us quite well too. So why don't I take down the presentation, and if there's any other questions you have about the process, about the plan, about RiverCOG, please feel free to ask, and then we'll let you go for the evening. So Harold, go ahead.
Just saying thank you very much. This has been very informative, and I appreciate all the comments, and look forward to future meetings.
So, and just for your information, we've been taking notes, and also we've been recording this, so we'll have a record of it, and we'll take notes. What we were going to do after all these meetings with the 17 planning commissions is we're going to come up with a summary report of what we heard and what we learned from all these discussions. And what's interesting is that just the process of attending different meetings with different towns, we're seeing the great variety of ideas and perspectives, and it's been a real exciting endeavor. And we hope to capture that in that portion of the plan where we discuss this consultation process with all of you. So any other questions or comments anyone would like to make before we sign off for the evening? All right. Seeing none. Everyone have a good evening. Stay cool, and please visit with us in the future, as we will be having public involvement later on in the project, and we will make sure the word gets out to you. So, thank you again.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Sam, Margot.
And thank you, Margot.
Good night.
Thank you for the first selectmen and the chairs of the commissions, and have a good night.
Good night. Thanks, Sam and Margot.
Thank you, Dan.
Bye, Dan.
Night all.